Hi, Brad.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's been an interesting week. I'm glad we're here to talk about challenge.
Oh, wow.
How about you?
I feel the same. I've had a very full week and very tiring. Yeah.
Wow. Tonight I have a town hall meeting here, and I'm about an hour away from our home office in another town. It's a town hall meeting where the community is trying to come together around mental health issues. I'm one of six, I think, panel members, but that could be interesting, how that
Oh,
goes.
Brad, thank you. That sounds like a lot. I can just imagine that this took a lot for you to be here too. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. I'm really looking forward to this. I was just kind of sitting here reflecting on what we should
Oh,
try to cover tonight with people, and just recognize that everyone is carrying so many challenges here, and to sit for a minute and examine that process. I'm really
right.
curious to see what people have to say. Very important piece of self-regulation. Self-talk is good.
Oh yeah, it's huge actually. It's a sign of intelligence.
I read that too, and I circled it, printed it out, and gave it to my family to make sure they know that that's okay. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all again this week. Got a lot going on, and I know you all do too. So always relevant, I think. And I was actually looking forward to just getting in a breakout room myself. Even though this is not group therapy, there are definitely elements of this that would be consistent with working on challenges in that sort of setting. So hopefully you see that consistency there week to week as we're moving and progressing through skills. So this first part, this physical regulation piece, and of course there was only like 3 pages of actual reading for you to do, which I'm super happy about, and you probably were too with your list of other chores this week. But contained in that is this whole idea of physical regulation and our body's response to challenge. So, we talked about the 3 different areas that we're going to go through: physical regulation, emotion regulation, and cognitive. Our body has a response, a hardwired built-in response to things that it sees as or perceives as threatening or challenging. And you can probably tell by the way I use that language in the book. I see threat and challenge as pretty synonymous. I know we could probably split hairs on that, but when it comes to the body's response, it detects a challenge, and that is sort of in this realm of threat. I have a response. I need to do something about that. So if you put that into some kind of real life context, and this has been going for however long human beings have been around, we could debate that. But this element of safety and trying to survive threat has been an ongoing evolutionary process for human beings, our species, for a long time. And thankfully, we're pretty good at it. If we weren't able to detect threat, or our ancestors weren't very good at that, you wouldn't be sitting here with us today. So, somewhere back in history, they were able to say, wow, that rumble in the bushes over there, that's not good. Or those berries I ate 2 weeks ago, I'm not going to eat those again. That was not a good effect. So this, as I'll kind of do some foreshadowing here around something called the negativity bias, but why and how we are built to be so good at detecting threat or the negative or looking for problems in our environment, it's actually a survival mechanism. The thing I want to highlight before we kind of go into what the questions are and the takeaways I wanted you to get from this is probably the number one takeaway. When you look at that fight, flight, or shutdown system and its response to threat, it doesn't know the difference. And this was a game changer for me in my own personal life. It does not know the difference between an existential threat, like a dangerous animal 20 yards from you, versus a social emotional threat. The feeling of loss, for example, a conflict with a loved one, feeling left out, being late to a meeting, being cut off in traffic, someone disagreeing with you about a core belief that you have, that you feel so strongly about, that this is the right thing to do, and they're coming from a different angle. That's a threat. And the body really doesn't have a mechanism in here that says, oh, that's this kind of a threat, that's that kind of a threat. It has what we're finding is more of just an on-off switch. To different degrees, it can go up and down, but it's more like a dial. And once you hit that switch, it's on. So if you think about your day and all of the different threats that you're encountering, and we can get into this idea, I want you to think about this when you're in your breakout groups, but How many social emotional threats do you encounter in a day, do you think? You know, hundreds probably. They're coming
There's been a
all
lot.
I said millions to myself. I was like,
they're,
you're the
they're
first person
coming.
I've ever heard talk about
Yeah.
somebody disagreeing with a core value as a threat. I've never heard anybody say that, but that's true. I
sure.
feel that, and
Yeah.
I thought I was crazy.
Yeah, when I used to do, well, I still do some, you know, relationship counseling. This, to me, this isn't also an individual. This is groups. This is group dynamics, because a lot of our threats come from how we perceive other people or how other people perceive us and how we get along or don't get along. I was also going to follow up on that with probably the majority of our social emotional threats come from ourselves, our thoughts, our fears, our inadequacies, our thoughts of failure, the things that we bring in and borrow from the future threat. That we can borrow a threat from 3 weeks from now about something that may never happen. Right? We see this all the time. My mom used to talk about it as borrowing trouble. Right? You can borrow trouble
like
from the
catastrophization, right?
Yes, very much. And if you just put it into this threat language, right, we're talking about the same thing here. Are we going to, you know, today's threats are right in front of us, but I can borrow a threat from 3 weeks forward. I can also, here's another thing you can do. If that's not enough for us human beings, we can go back and dredge up threat from 2 years ago from a conversation that we had with somebody. So now not only do I have today's threat, future threat, I can bring past threat, and I've got all this stuff on my head, in my backpack, carrying it around. So I want you to think about that. So that one statement about the body doesn't really know the difference between a physical existential threat, a dangerous animal in front of me, versus a thought of inadequacy, feeling left out, a divisive conversation with somebody violating one of my core values or principles. So the body's going to respond with this intense. And the thing is to start thinking about is how effective, you know, how you hopefully you read this and you started to outline some of these symptoms that you're having, but this, how effective is it going to be to have this gigantic physiological response in a time or in the face of a challenge that requires something completely different, a completely different response than this gigantic physical? Because if you think about being loud and being scary or hiding and running away or all of these things, and you might be in a meeting with somebody, right? And you push yourself away from the table, or your voice gets loud, or they can see all this on your face about how you're not liking what they're saying. How effective are you going to be in accomplishing your goal there? And so it really comes down to, we want to be effective. We want to manage these things effectively. My partner that I work with that also trains on this, he's pretty big in performance-based regulation and how this impacts our ability to manage our energy effectively. How much, you know, that I want you to think about that as you talk about this in your breakout sessions too, but how much energy do you think this process takes from you and other people? And the last thing is, remember last time we talked about one of our primary goals in self-regulation or improving our self-regulation is managing this thing called reactivity. And so in the book where we're talking about that top brain and bottom brain, that's a concept you really want to get familiar with and remember and share with other people, please, if you have a chance to do that. I think it's one of the most life-changing pieces of information for people to understand that this is a normal process. We all have those parts of our brain that get engaged and cause us to do these different things. But that bottom part of our brain, when we feel threatened, that top part that makes us a human being, where that higher level thinking, creativity, problem solving, all that stuff is up here. When we feel threatened, that bottom part of our brain takes over, that lizard brain, the old brain. It only has one goal: eliminate threats, get away from threats, right? Keep us safe. It does, and it's very short-term focused. And the last thing is it's built to be reactive on purpose, because that's the part of our brain that kicks in when we're in danger. So if you are in danger, it makes perfect sense that part of the brain takes over and you move quickly, you say things quickly, you do things quickly to survive in that moment. And that makes a lot of sense 10, 15, 20,000 years ago, when most of our threats were existential, physiological threats. In today's world, where for most of us, over 50% of the threats you encounter. And I'd say for most of us, it's probably like 95% of the threats you encounter in a day are not physiological existential threats. They're social emotional. They're online, they're in a meeting, they're in relationships, they're at work, they're all those kinds of things, where it doesn't make sense to have a gigantic physiological response. In the spirit of skill training, so that's just a little bit of background on what the skill is about. We really have to practice. This first skill is all about self-awareness and recognition. So what my goal for you is, do you know the one or two? So these are the questions I want you to talk about in your breakout session. The one or two specific symptoms, and if you've got 3 or 4, that's great. But I really want you to know the 1 or 2 specific physiological symptoms that you can be more aware of when your fight or flight system is kicking in. What is it? How do you know? And how would you describe it? And what you don't want to write down is, well, I get anxious. I really want us to be a lot more specific than that, because that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. Does that mean that your fists ball up? Does that mean that you want to leave right away? Does that mean that your breathing gets dysregulated and upset? Does that mean that you have stomach issues? Does it mean that your shoulders are up to your ears? I want you to know specifically what that means for you, that you can recognize. Because once we start to do that, that's the principle of skill training. It's something that we can specifically describe concretely and start to measure and practice and see how we're doing with it, and increase self-awareness around. Describe your symptoms to those in your group, if you feel comfortable doing that, hopefully. So name a couple, describe them. Also like you to kind of think about if you noticed any patterns in your behavior over the last week, if you're more of a fight, more of a flight, or more of a shutdown kind of a person. What are your tendencies like? Because we notice some differences in people. And I think it's interesting to talk about, am I different in different places? Am I different at home than I am at work? Or am I different around my friends than I am at my coworkers and family? So definitely some insight to be gained through that discussion. And then also, what does your fight look like? Or what does your flight look like? And what does your shutdown look like specifically?
Brad, can you distinguish between fawn versus freeze for us?
Yeah, so when I think of fawning, and I didn't put that in there, and to simplify, it is a fourth. So I usually say fight, flight, freeze, fight, flight, freeze, or fight, flight, shutdown. And then there is a fourth one called fawning, where what that feels like to me when I'm at work is like, I'm just going to stay off the radar this week. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And maybe none of you know what that means, but means that my capacity for managing challenge is like 0. And I want to not experience any more threat this week. So I will try to blend in with the environment like a deer fawn with spots, and hope that the threat doesn't smell me or see me or detect me at all. And I'll survive that way. So there are different contexts where people will fawn. Also, there's some trauma and abusive situations where people learn to fawn to please the thing or the person that's threatening them. So there are other capacities, but at least in my life, that's what that means to me. So it's if that's something that you can apply here, that would make total sense as well. Keep track of kind of themes that come up, if you would, and then we'll ask the groups to report those themes back.
A captain on the fire department in our city here in Calgary. I'm constantly in fight. I'll say fight, flight mode. Like there's lots of firefighters are like that.
Yeah.
And for me, like I know the physical things is my stomach for sure is a problem. Like
Okay.
that's my number one thing.
Wow. Yeah.
And a lot of it is, I think I'm really good at anticipating where the problem is going to go in let's say an incident of my job. I'm really good at planning ahead of where, as Wayne Gretzky as I'm Canadian, where the puck is going to go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm really good at that. And I'm really good at when an incident happens, a really bad incident, of where things could lead. So I'm always 2 or 3 head steps of the game. The problem with me is that in social settings, I analyze everything to death, like I would an emergency scene,
Yeah.
which it ultimately causes me physical symptoms. Like, did I say the right thing, or I didn't? Like, I worry about that stuff. And you're right. I worry about stuff that I said 3 years ago that can haunt me going into the future, which causes me physical symptoms, which is
Wow.
like acute symptoms are probably stomach and digestive problems.
I'm
Number
just
one.
thinking about the energy that takes.
Takes an incredible
mental-
amount of energy.
Wow. Wow.
100%. So like I was a wildland firefighter for 10 years. So now I'm a structural firefighter for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I like, these are the, that hypervigilance has caused me a lot of physical symptoms for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of,
I thank you for sharing that. And I hope we probably should keep the same breakout rooms because I definitely want to talk to you and come back to skill 2. How do you set the cup down? I'll be curious because it seems like you're carrying the cup all the time.
100%. Like that's my problem is, and lately it's affected me and some of my peers as well. We're all in our 50s now.
Yeah.
I think there's a extra something going on there as well with that.
Yeah. Have you done some reading on things like cortisol and some of the biological impacts of chronic stress? Do you think you feel some of that or?
I have, and I'm like trying to deal with the cortisol because it's caused me lots of sleep issues with shift work as well, right? Shift work, my age.
Yep. It kind of catches up after a while.
It catches up, and there's like, at least in my profession, there's this expectation of perfection.
Yeah. So there's judgment.
Yeah. So then you become more hypervigilant, so you don't make mistakes, which causes you other issues, I find.
Or you are tendency to make more mistakes when you're reactive and you're hurting and you have less energy.
Correct.
So, yeah. So stomach, what else? Is there anything else? Do you notice tension, body tension? Do you get headaches?
But I do get headaches due to stress for sure.
Do you carry any of that in your shoulders? Do you notice?
Oh, of course. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that's just common with what you've described is that, and then you'll get that. There's a couple of muscles that connect up to the back of the head. And then that's often what leads to that pain sometimes, or an increase in pain. Even if you're susceptible from other reason, it's going to complicate that. But
For sure.
Anything else? So stomach, headache, you notice anything else as far as fight, flight, or?
I do all 4 things.
Okay.
I'll be honest. I've got into some arguments for those topics that I find like that are important to me or I'm passionate about. Like I've done the flight where I've isolated myself basically. Being a pack man, I call it. Like you say fawning, I call it pack. Just staying within the pack and not worth it.
Right.
It's just really not. Like
Yeah. This is one of the patterns I see sometimes with men and women too, but maybe in our younger days we're more fight. Then we've sometimes said things and we know our fight can be pretty ugly. We're not going to do that because we don't want to hurt other people. So we end up just turning off, disconnecting and withdrawing and isolating. So that's a common pattern. If you understand that all this is normal human species response to threat, and it's like sometimes I think we think we're more evolved than we are, but these things are still right here in our everyday life, in our bodies, and we see it all the time and feel it. It's just that we don't talk about it and describe it and learn to do anything with it. So I appreciate that. Anything from your side, Jenny, on those?
Yeah, so I definitely have a fight tendency. I'm kind of a one-hit wonder when it comes to my physical response. Like I am a fighter. Like you had me thinking, even when I take it away, like you said, what do you do with it? Like once it happens.
Yeah.
And so, I'll take it away and I'll have those guilty feelings. And then I'll want to re-engage. And even then, when I re-engage, I'm generally not in a place where I'm calm still. I'm fighting again. And then so it's like this, I want to try and deal with it. And so I keep engaging in an unhealthy way is what I'd say.
Because it's threatening for me to carry that guilt too. So you see that cycle all the time. And then that threat begets threat, and you just get in this vicious cycle and don't, and it just keeps making it worse. It's like,
when you talk about core beliefs, what I'm working on, they tell me I'm political and they tell me that they don't, like, people just don't want to hear about that, so don't talk about it.
So the threat there is not only are you having a disagreement with these people, but these people are also your connection, your support. It takes the threat and magnifies it, not just as a disagreement, but also as a loss. So there's a loss there too. So that we can rate these threats as big, small, This is giant. That is
This
giant.
is giant. This is like an 11. Like when you have that, I thought of a different example, which was like a 3,
Yep.
But the symptoms, when you talk about my symptoms, I definitely feel like a gut punch. And then when you talk about my response, my voice gets loud right away. Especially in those like 11 situations, it's like I have no time. There's like when you talk about response time,
Yeah.
I'm all reaction. Like it is like I give, less than 3 seconds and I'm saying this is, something like,
Okay.
how can you expect me to believe that? How can you know what I mean? Things like that. And the unable to think clearly thing comes in there too. Being in a room where people are saying things that I don't agree with, let's say,
Yeah.
I find my foot will start to shake. Like if
Yeah.
my legs are crossed,
Yeah.
my foot will shake. Like I'm anxious, to like get in there and say something.
Yeah.
I
So we have
will
a release. We have a release of adrenaline along with
Okay.
cortisol. So when you're sitting in a chair, that adrenaline is supposed to help you fight the bear. There's no bear. You're sitting in a chair. So what do you think that adrenaline is going to cause? Movement somewhere. It's got to go do something. So your
Wow,
foot's
okay.
going to start shaking. We do these. We call them. They look strange because it makes no sense. We're not solving anything, but the energy. Your body's just got a huge dose of energy boosting chemical. So we see all kinds of different movements from people. That's a really good call out. I want to make sure we hit that with the group.
Yeah, and I do get like I'll find a lump in my throat sometimes too, and I can get I definitely can feel my heart pounding in my chest sometimes. Like in certain situations, it's like I can feel it in my throat. Like that's how much I can feel my heart pounding.
Yeah.
And then it definitely affects both of our sleep, I would say.
For sure.
Yeah. Because I'm going to lay down and go to sleep, and then all this threat comes in my head. We have kind of a poem or a joke that we tell about, it's sleep time, but here comes all this threat to bed with me. And so adrenaline, you're not going to sleep with adrenaline. Your body's thinking there's a bear there, but there's no bear. So
Welcome back, everyone.
probably an unfair question, but any of you have stomach issues or gastrointestinal? No, you don't have to raise your hand. That was a silly question. I know some people do because there's sure a lot of products sold in this world for that. Anyway, so what happens is when we experience threat, it sort of shuts down. It stops processing because energy is diverted away from that system to our major muscle groups because you're getting ready to fight a threat or run from a threat or hunker down. So energy is diverted away from these processes that aren't as important at the time. Like processing that sandwich that you had a half an hour ago, really not that important compared to if you're not going to survive the next 20 minutes, right? So that system shuts down. So that sandwich is sitting there, and then the system has to start up all over again. And then you get the starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And I don't have to describe what that feels like and looks like and sounds like, but it's uncomfortable.
I think just not thinking clearly, just this inability to really think rationally from multiple vantage points at a given situation, because you're overtaken by this really strong need to defend yourself.
Yeah. So let me cut. So that's all I need to go from that one. Thank you. So that top brain, bottom brain right there. So where do we need to be at? So the neuroscience in the last 25 years tells us when we look at your brain and you experience a challenge or threat, your body's fight or flight kicks in. That top part of your brain, the cortex, the higher level thinking, the thing that makes you a human being with compassion, forethought, reflection ability, relationship ability, all that higher level problem solving part of your brain shuts down. The bottom part of your brain, that lizard brain, that old brain, that reactive brain, that survival brain picks up tremendously. So who's driving the bus when you get upset? It's the lizard, right? And that's why we say sometimes hurtful things to people we care about. That's why we have trouble making sense out of other people's viewpoints. We're not interested in hearing anyone else's viewpoint when we're in lizard brain, right? We're win the fight, eliminate the threat, or get away from the threat. That's it. And so great description. Okay, there's 2 of the systems. What else we got?
How about neck pain?
Yes. So we've got a musculoskeletal response. Are we tight and tense in the face of a threat, or are we loose and relaxed? We're tight and tense. We are getting ready for a fight here. So what happens when muscle tension is going on for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours? Anybody get that creeping up the back of your neck here, headache by Tuesday or Wednesday, Monday on a rough week, right? When you have tense muscles, our muscles aren't built to be tense for hours and days and weeks and months. So that creates pain. So yes, third system. Good job. Y'all are killing these. You're just knocking them right out. Okay, let's go. What else?
Lump in the throat.
Yeah, lump in the throat is really a really interesting one. Pass. I don't really know. I've seen some different theories on that one. I don't know what the purpose of a lump in your throat if a bear is chasing you is really going to do.
Well, I think a lump in the throat is just hiding. Like, like if you're under threat, you want to like hide. So
It
like
might
I
keep you from talking or
quiet.
making noise
Yeah.
noise. Yeah.
So like that's how I feel. Like if someone starts yelling
Awesome.
at me, I just hide because I don't even want to.
Excellent point. Excellent point. That could be to keep maybe a baby from making noise if there's a threat around, or maybe that just stayed with us as evolution. Very interesting. In our group, we talked about this extra restless movement that we get, like a leg shaking or a toe tapping, or any of you pin clickers out there. I know the woman in the office next to me is a pin clicker, and 100% accuracy. If I hear her pin clicking over there, I can say, what's wrong? And she's working on this significant problem over there. Something's happened that's catastrophic. So we were talking about the fourth response here is a chemical response to threat. So you are doped up with adrenaline and cortisol when you experience threat. That's to give you energy to fight the bear, get away from the bear, whatever you need to do. But if you're sitting at your desk chair or in your car or on the couch with your family and you've got this dose of adrenaline, where's it going to go? It has nowhere else to go but into these sometimes what we would consider like useless, unusual sort of patterned, rhythmic, repetitive movements just to be used up. So we've got brain, we've got musculoskeletal, we've got GI.
Body temperature regulation.
Temperature is a really interesting one. So I think some have theorized that that's just a response to all the processes going on internally. You think about everything we just described. That's a lot of processes going on in the body all at once. So it could make some sense that that's going to heat us up quite a bit. Yeah. So the other couple that I wanted to hit on were, does anybody have noticed breathing change in their breath, either more rapid breathing, or anybody recognize that they're a breath holder?
Yeah.
That they hold their breath in stressful, challenging situations. Go ahead, Gordon.
Very shallow breath sometimes.
Yeah, shallow breathing or even breath holding. It's interesting. It's like, why would I hold my breath? How could that be adaptive in a threatening situation to hold my breath? Well, just like I think it was Mary that was saying earlier, it could be to stay quiet. If you've ever spent enough time in the woods around predator or prey, there are times that you're close enough where they can hear you breathing, and that could be a survival mechanism to not breathe for sure. And the other one that I wanted to make sure we hit on was pulmonary. So some people explain that this blood flow, they can actually feel their heart beating almost clear up into their head or their chest or their neck. So yeah, like a fish flopping in their chest, sometimes it's described as. So this exercise, good job. It sounds like you all nailed it. This first skill is raising awareness about fight or flight. So how, because like I said in the first session, you can't regulate something if you're not aware of it happening, right? First step in self-regulation is self-awareness. So what I'm hoping you're able to do is take one or two of these that are specific to you and take that to your personal plan at the end of the book. And that's what you want to fill in that first box with. Under warning signs is, how do you respond? And this is where I think this is much different than a lot of other frameworks where you're working on creating change, because in other frameworks, warning signs and triggers are more focused on external things that are going on. You notice we didn't talk much about what's triggering you. And I think that's one of the things that really is a different process here. There are a lot of those out there. If you want to look for that, we could spend a lot of time talking about the different problems and triggers and challenges that people have, or we could spend a little bit of time talking about the process that happens when human beings experience challenge and try to get better at it.
Brad,
Yeah.
can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yes.
One of the questions here was, are my symptoms more consistent with fight, flight, or shutdown behaviors? And
Yeah,
I wrote down all three,
okay.
because it
Yeah.
depends on the situation and who I'm facing or what I'm facing.
Yes. Yeah. I hear that a lot. I do think sometimes we have some nuances about, I've we were talking in our group that sometimes people have learned different patterns. Like if you know that your fight is pretty ugly, you've learned that in your younger days, especially, and you've hurt people that you care about when you get upset. Sometimes we resort to, I'm going to be more of a shutdown. I'm just going to leave because I know if I engage my fight, it's not good. It's not good for me and other people. So there are some changes that we make over time, but you're right. We can be all three. We can be all four. We can fawn too. So
Just want to highlight that we had a really interesting conversation about fawning in our group, talking about actually how fawning is a way of staying safe. Like if you are under threat, you'll just go along in order for the threat to end. And so sometimes like under coercion, or especially looking at size or power differentials in physical situations, fawning is actually a way to protect yourself.
for sure. Yep. All these are survival mechanisms. You're right. And they're perfectly normal. I think the other thing to think about here with everything we described is completely normal human process of how to respond to challenge. It's hardwired. And I also think it's really interesting that we're not really taught how to manage these things. But they're so intense and they're so impactful on our relationships, our lives, our ability to succeed in different areas with challenge. So.
Yeah, and I did find I reacted differently at work than I did at home as well.
Interesting.
That's still a pattern, but I'm retired now, but it was very much a struggle at work, how to manage other people versus how to manage my family. Interesting.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of places to do a deeper dive here if you're interested. What equals threat to you? That's a very interesting tunnel to go down. It's very insightful. That's kind of a personal journey that you can take. Knowing your hot buttons for sure is helpful as a human being, but it's still going to come back. You're still going to come back to the same process to manage, right? It's still going to be this fight, flight, shutdown. It's still going to be the same processes that we have to learn to manage, no matter what the trigger or threat is going to be. Kind of feeling like, oh my gosh, okay, I noticed all these things. Now what am I going to do with this stuff? Well, that's why we have step number 2 coming this next week.
You mentioned this notion of how threat is defined and how threat is experienced. Like I know, and I've worked with plenty of people, and I think I've been that in my own. I've lived it, and I've when you're exposed to cumulative traumas over and over and over again. These are real traumas, not just social, emotional. Like these are real, actual threats constantly. Like the threat of violence, like
physical threats.
Physical threats, threats to your, the constant name calling, the bullying, all of that kind of stuff that oftentimes you are exposed to as a child. And then to try and have never learned self-regulation skills later, and then you try, and then the addiction comes in. But then for people who are recovering and only learning self-regulation later in life, when dysregulation has been so imprinted on their brain, like where are there any other resources? Like this seems like this is something that we would encounter like just in, I guess, our regular day-to-day life where we're not exposed to or don't have that background. Like I wonder if there is are there any other resources real quickly, Brad, that somebody who is profoundly affected by cumulative trauma and has just a hyperactivated stress response, and where can they go? Could this trigger disassociation?
And here, 2 things I would say is we started out with kids for just that reason, because we know people are exposed to this early in life, and the longer you go with it, like you said, these effects are just going to get worse and worse. So we have pre-K curriculum, elementary curriculum, middle school, high school curriculum, teaching kids how to manage this stuff when it comes up and what this is about, because it can really feel like you're losing your mind if you don't know that this is a natural, normal process. It's very uncomfortable to we all know what it feels like. It's overwhelming. It's confusing. You're 7 years old or 17 years old or 27 years old. It's difficult. So to answer your question, I think there is some hope for kids and teaching young people how to do this, and also parents to help their kids with this. But what you're talking about, I feel like is more at that clinical level, to where they would need some one-on-one. And I would hope it would be somebody who would have some foundational understanding of what we're trying to work through here. But you're right, you can't do into that level of clinical operation in a book. So this is a way to expose people, share the skills with people, and practice together. But so you might be thinking, so where do we go from here? So it's a real simple, and I told you this whole framework is super logical and step by step for a reason. So if we are saying to ourselves, and we've sort of accepted this idea that this threat response in today's world is really not helping me, especially if it goes unmanaged or unchecked and it's just sort of doing its thing and it's been reactive my entire life and it's caused me to hurt people and not think clearly and have a stomach ache all the time and be stressed out and not get good sleep. And there's not a lot of benefits that I can think of from this, especially over a chronic long-term period. If we're looking to turn down the threat response, what is the opposite of experiencing threat? What do we need to create? And that's how logical it is. So the opposite of feeling threatened is feeling safe. So chapter 2 and skill number 2 is all about what is the most impactful ways for human beings to create safety in their life? And so I'll leave you with that. And that's what chapter 2 is about. And that's what we're going to explore next week.